The stars were quiet, but silence can be dangerous. On the edge of the galaxy, far from safe worlds and shining cities, a colony burned. Fires spread across its surface. Towers collapsed into dust. Families huddled together in fear, listening to the endless thunder of enemy cannons from the sky. The invaders had come without warning. Their warships, black and cruel, filled the heavens above the small world. The colony's defenders were already gone. Their fleet had tried to resist, but it lasted only minutes. Strong warships, ships they had believed would protect them, had been torn apart like paper. The survivors on the ground knew their end was near. There was no army left. No one could stand against the empire that attacked them. Yet in the heart of the burning colony, one group still tried. A small bunker deep beneath the ruins held a transmitter, old and battered but still alive. Inside, frightened hands worked frantically over glowing consoles. Engineers, soldiers, and civilians sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces pale, their voices shaking. They had only one chance left, an SOS signal. "Send it," whispered an elder, her voice breaking. "Send it now." The message left the planet as a beam of desperate light. It flew past the burning skies, past the wreckage of fallen ships, out into the endless dark of space. It carried no pride, no arrogance, only a single cry for help. But this was no ordinary signal. It was not sent on the Empire's channels, nor on the old neutral bands of the galaxy. No, it was sent on a frequency forbidden by the enemy, a frequency feared in whispers. It was sent to Earth. The survivors did not know if humans would hear. They did not know if humans would care. But they knew one truth: if no one answered, they would all die. Above the colony, the enemy commander laughed from the bridge of his flagship. His scales glistened in the red glow of battle. His eyes shone with cruel delight as he watched the fires spread. "Pathetic," he hissed. "They call for help, but none will come. Who dares to face us? Who dares to fight the Empire?" He did not know that the SOS was already racing across the stars. The signal passed through asteroid fields, slipped across dark nebulae, and brushed against forgotten stations. It moved faster and farther, until at last, it reached the blue jewel of a distant system, a planet small in size compared to the Empire's but vast in will. Earth. Deep beneath its oceans, hidden inside secret stations orbiting the moon, buried under mountains of steel, alarms awakened. The signal was received. Screens lit up. Voices echoed through underground halls. Soldiers stood to attention. Commanders lifted their heads. It was a cry for help. Humanity had been waiting. For decades, Earth had watched the galaxy with wary eyes. They had seen empires rise and fall, seen how the strong crushed the weak, how colonies were erased without mercy. Humanity had stayed silent, preparing in shadows. They built fleets in hidden shipyards, forged weapons in secret, and trained soldiers not just to defend Earth, but to answer when the galaxy called. And now, someone had called. In the command chamber of Earth's fleet headquarters, a general stood tall, his eyes fixed on the signal's coordinates. His voice was calm, but behind it burned a fire. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "They are not alone." Far across the planet, hangars opened. Massive warships, hidden under camouflage and cloaked bays, roared to life. Engines flared with blue fire. The ground shook as titans of steel rose into the skies. In orbit, smaller ships assembled into formations, their hulls gleaming with strange markings that pulsed like living light. Humanity's fleet was moving. Back on the burning colony, survivors crouched in silence. Hours had passed since the signal left. Many had lost hope. Mothers held children close, whispering soft lies that everything would be fine, even as enemy soldiers marched closer. The bunker's lights flickered. Oxygen levels dropped. The end was coming. Then the sky changed. The survivors heard it first, a deep vibration in the air, like the heartbeat of a giant. Then the ground trembled. The enemy commanders on their ships froze, their sensors screaming with warnings. Something was entering orbit, something massive. In the burning skies above the colony, the first human warship appeared. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a blaze of light. its hull black as night but glowing with blue veins of energy. The ship was colossal, larger than anything the colony had ever seen. Its presence silenced the battlefield. The enemy armada, confident and cruel, hesitated for the first time. And then another ship arrived, and another, and another, the void, filled with giants. Human destroyers, carriers, dreadnoughts, ships built not for exploration but for war, took position in orbit, their weapons locked on the enemy fleet. The blue light of their engines painted the skies, drowning out the red of the fires below. The survivors in the bunker wept. Some fell to their knees. They had called out into the void, and against all odds, someone had answered. The enemy commander stared in disbelief, his arrogance cracking. "Impossible," he whispered. "Humans? Here?" But the truth was undeniable. The desperate SOS had been heard, and humanity had answered with a war fleet. The colony still burned. Even as the survivors cheered at the first glimpse of the human ships, fear did not leave them. They had seen fleets before, great fleets that came to protect them, only to be crushed by the Empire's war machine. Their hearts wanted to believe, but their minds whispered caution. Would the humans be different? Could even this fleet stand against hundreds of enemy ships? The enemy commander thought not. His fleet stretched across the skies like a wall of firepower. Hundreds of cruisers, destroyers, and battleships floated in perfect formation, weapons charged and ready. The sight alone was enough to crush hope. His voice boomed across his flagship, calm and cruel. So, the humans came. Fools. They walk into their grave. On the ground, the survivors gathered in the ruins of their city. Some stared upward with wide eyes, unable to speak. Others whispered prayers. A child tugged on her mother's arm, pointing at the glowing blue engines high above. "They came," she said softly. The humans really came. But hope was fragile. In the command bunker, officers argued over the screens. "The enemy has more than 300 warships," one said. "The humans are outnumbered 10 to 1. Another shook his head. "Numbers mean nothing if they fall quickly. If the humans cannot hold, we will all be slaughtered." The room fell silent, and every face turned back to the skies. The enemy wasted no time. Orders spread through their fleet. Cannons charged. Torpedo bays opened. Engines roared. Their commanders mocked the humans, laughing that one desperate fleet would dare to face the Empire. They believed the humans were reckless, naive, arrogant enough to think themselves equals. Yet deep inside their pride, unease stirred. The human ships stood still, unmoving, their weapons cold, their formations perfect. They did not rush, they did not threaten. They waited as if the galaxy itself would come to them. In the enemy fleet, whispers began. Why do they not fire? Why do they not move? The silence was worse than words. Inside the lead human battleship, Earth's commanders watched, the enemy with calm eyes. They saw the numbers, the firepower, the arrogance of the Empire, but they did not fear. For decades, Earth had prepared for this moment. Every warship was armed with weapons the galaxy had never seen. Every soldier knew that humanity's survival rested on battles like this. They would not fail. Still, the wait was long. Minutes dragged like hours. On the surface, the survivors could barely breathe. Each second felt like the last before death. The sky was filled with two armies, the Empire's black wave of destruction, and humanity's silent wall of steel. All that was left was the spark to ignite the storm. The enemy commander gave the order. Destroy them. A roar of light filled the void. Plasma cannons screamed, beams of raw energy cut through space. Torpedoes streaked forward like burning comets. Hundreds of ships unleashed their fury at once. The heavens lit up with fire brighter than any sun. The ground shook as the blasts cut through the skies. To the survivors below, it looked as though the end had finally come. Too much, whispered a soldier in the bunker. No fleet can survive that. But the human ships did not burn. The storm of energy slammed into their shields and vanished. Waves of blue light rippled outward, absorbing the fire, bending it, swallowing it whole. Not a single human ship was destroyed. Not a single hull was even scratched. The survivors gasped. The enemy froze. On the flagship, the commander's mocking smile disappeared. His claws dug into the armrest of his throne. Impossible, he hissed. No shield can take that power. His officers stared at their screens, eyes wide, unable to explain. But the humans did not explain. They remained silent, their fleet still waiting. Only the glow of their shields told the truth. The enemy's strongest strike had done nothing. Fear began to crawl into the hearts of the Empire's warriors. Soldiers whispered in their halls. Captains shouted for answers. For the first time, they questioned the strength of their own fleet. On the ground, the survivors stared in awe. Children clapped, elders wept. Soldiers who had lost everything suddenly stood straighter. For the first time since the invasion began, they believed. The enemy commander roared again, furious. Fire again! Crush them! Once more, his fleet unleashed fire. Once more the heavens turned into storms of light. But once more the human shield stood strong. It was no longer the survivors who felt desperation. It was the Empire. The truth was clear now, though they did not want to admit it. The humans had not come to beg for mercy. They had not come to try and fail like others. They had come prepared. The survivors in the bunker leaned forward, hope replacing fear. Their leader whispered words that would be remembered forever. The signal was answered, and above them the human fleet finally began to move. The enemy firestorm faded into silence. The sky still glowed red from the afterburn of plasma blasts, and the ground shook from the echoes of torpedoes that had screamed through the atmosphere. Yet when the smoke cleared, the human fleet remained untouched. Their ships floated in perfect formation, calm and steady, their hulls glowing with blue light as if the enemy's fury had only awakened them. The survivors on the ground stared in disbelief. A mother whispered to her child, "They cannot be destroyed." Soldiers in the bunker gripped each other's shoulders, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. The humans had survived what no fleet should survive. The enemy commander leaned forward in his throne, claws digging into the steel. His voice cracked with fury. "No! Shields cannot hold forever. Keep firing. Break them." But even he no longer believed his own words. For the first time in his life, doubt curled into his chest. And then, the human fleet moved. Not in chaos, not in panic, with precision. The wall of warships shifted as one, lines closing into sharp formations. Engines burned brighter, blue light, flaring like a second sunrise. The silence was terrifying. They sent no threats, no demands, no words at all. They simply advanced. On the surface, the survivors held their breath. "They're going to attack," someone whispered. Hope and fear tangled together, pressing down on every heart. The first strike came from a human dreadnought. Its cannon unfolded like a glowing spear. Energy gathered at its core, bright enough to cast shadows across the ground below. The hum deepened, louder, sharper, until it roared like thunder across the battlefield. Then the cannon fired, a single beam shot. Across the void. It struck an enemy cruiser dead center. For one instant the ship stood whole. Then it split apart in silence, its armor tearing like paper, its engines exploding into brilliant fire. Thousands of enemy soldiers died before they could even scream. The survivors on the colony cheered, their voices raw with relief. For the first time they saw the Empire bleed, the enemy fleet froze. Before they could recover, another human ship fired, then another. Blinding beams and streaks of missiles cut through space, each one striking with precision. Enemy ships burst apart, like fireworks, their wreckage scattering into the void. The human fleet had not come to defend. It had come to hunt. On the enemy flagship, panic spread like fire. Officers shouted over each other, trying to make sense of what they saw. Their weapons, cut through shields. We cannot track their targeting. They are predicting our movements. The commander roared for silence, but his crew no longer looked at him with respect. They looked at him with fear. They had believed themselves untouchable. Now they were prey, in orbit. The battle raged. Human destroyers darted between heavy battleships, weaving through enemy fire like dancers of war. Their cannons tore through weaker ships with ease, explosions lighting the sky. Carriers unleashed waves of fighters, small but fast, their trails glowing as they cut into enemy formations. Every move was coordinated, every strike deliberate. To the survivors below, it looked like an unstoppable tide. Blue light swept across the heavens, tearing through the black swarm of the Empire. The human fleet did not fight with desperation. They fought with confidence, as if this battle was already decided. On the ground, children clapped their hands, their fear forgotten. Old men who had lost everything to the Empire fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. "We are saved," one whispered. "The humans, they are our saviors." But above, the enemy commander knew salvation for the survivors meant doom for him. His voice cracked with rage. "Regroup. Form the shield wall. Surround them." But his orders fell apart as his fleet burned. Ships tried to maneuver, but human fighters tore into their lines. Commanders tried to rally, but human beams cut them down before they could speak. The turning of the tide was no longer coming. It had already arrived. The survivors in the bunker clutched each other as the heavens exploded in light. Every second brought another enemy ship crashing down, another explosion tearing the night apart. The humans had answered their SOS, not with words, not with promises, but with fire. And yet through it all, the human fleet remained calm. Their warships did not rush, did not stumble. They advanced like a predator, striking with purpose, showing no mercy. The galaxy had mocked humanity, called them weak, called them late to the stars. But now in this moment those words burned with the wreckage of the Empire. The survivors looked up at the glowing ships in the sky, their hearts pounding with awe. This was not just rescue. This was a warning to the galaxy. When the humans answered, an SOS, they answered with war. The void exploded into chaos. The first human strikes had already torn apart enemy cruisers, but now the full storm was unleashed. The human fleet moved as one, every ship locked into perfect formation, every weapon firing with precision. The calm silence that had once surrounded them was gone. Now their fury shook the stars. Enemy commanders screamed orders, their voices breaking through static. "Focus fire on the dreadnoughts. Break their line. Push them back." But their words drowned in panic. The human fleet did not give them space to breathe. Their destroyers cut through like blades, weaving between enemy formations. Their carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, small ships darting like sparks across the battlefield. Their dreadnoughts stood like mountains, cannons glowing, releasing beams that cracked battleships in half. On the ground, the survivors watched the sky ignite. Explosions lit up the heavens brighter than day. Every blast shook the soil beneath their feet, but none could look away. Soldiers who had once buried their heads in despair now stared upward with hope burning in their eyes. The enemy was not used to this. For centuries, their fleets had crushed weaker worlds, silenced cries for help, and ruled with fear. But the humans did not fear them. The humans fought as if they had been waiting for this very moment. Every move was measured, every strike exact, as if the enemy's tactics had already been studied and broken long before the battle began. On the alien flagship, the commander's claws dug into his throne. He had mocked the humans. Now his voice cracked with rage. "Hold the line. They are few. Numbers will crush them." Yet even as he spoke, he saw his fleet faltering. Ships broke formation, captains shouted in confusion, and once proud warships fled from their positions, unwilling to face the blue fire that consumed their comrades. One of his officers whispered the truth he did not want to hear. "Commander, numbers mean nothing if they all fall." Above, a human battleship turned its cannons toward the largest enemy carrier. Blue light gathered, humming like thunder. In a single strike, the carrier burst apart, its wreckage scattering into the fleet. Fighters that had been waiting inside never launched, their pilots consumed by fire before they could fight. The enemy's strength was bleeding faster than they could stop it. The human fleet pressed forward. Destroyers pierced the enemy's flanks, cutting down frigates with ruthless speed. Fighters swarmed like a storm of wasps, overwhelming defenses, tearing through enemy formations. Dreadnoughts, glowing like burning titans, advanced step by step. Every blast ripping through ships once thought invincible. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. On the surface, the survivors trembled, not with fear, but with awe. Children clapped, shouting each time an enemy ship exploded. Old men wept, whispering that justice had come at last. Soldiers in the bunkers cheered, pounding, their fists against the walls, their voices shaking with raw emotion. Still the enemy fought. Pride would not let them surrender. They fired torpedoes in endless waves, but human shields held. They launched coordinated strikes, but human fighters intercepted them all. Every desperate move ended the same way, with fire consuming another of their ships. The commander's chest tightened as he watched his empire crumble before his eyes. Never had he imagined defeat. Never had he believed one fleet could face his armada. Yet the truth was burning in front of him. This was no ordinary fleet. This was something built in silence, hidden from the galaxy, and now unleashed with terrifying purpose. He turned to his crew, but their eyes no longer held respect. They held fear. The kind of fear that eats the soul. For the first time in generations, the Empire's warriors saw themselves not as conquerors, but as prey. Above the battlefield, the human fleet moved like a predator closing in on its kill. Their silence was more terrifying than any battle cry. They did not taunt. They did not boast. They simply fought with unstoppable will. Each shot carried a message carved into fire. Humanity would not bow. Humanity would not break. Minutes passed like hours. The sky was filled with wreckage. Half the enemy fleet already burned, their hulks drifting in silence. The others fought on, but their strikes were weaker, their unity shattered. Every second, humanity pressed them closer to collapse. On the ground, the survivors wept openly now. The bunker shook with cheers, voices rising louder than the sounds of war. For the first time in their lives, they had seen the Empire bleed. For the first time, hope had a shape: steel, fire, and the blazing blue light of Earth's warfleet. The enemy commander finally gave the order his pride had long resisted. "Retreat," he whispered, his voice hollow. His officers hesitated, stunned, but the truth was clear. The Empire could not win, but even retreat would not save them. The humans had only just begun. The void was filled with wreckage. Burning. Fragments of enemy ships drifted like broken bones across the stars. Fires glowed faintly against the darkness, the only light left from vessels that had once carried thousands of soldiers. Yet the battle was not over. The Empire's fleet still stretched across the sky, though it was no longer proud, no longer united. What had once been a wall of unstoppable power now looked fractured and broken, every ship fighting for survival. The humans pressed forward. Their fleet moved with frightening precision, every vessel holding its place, every strike chosen with care. Human destroyers slipped between enemy formations, blasting weaker ships apart with surgical strikes. Carriers unleashed more fighters, small ships darting through gaps like predators tearing at wounded prey. Dreadnoughts advanced like giants, their cannons blazing with blue fire that split cruisers and battleships in half. On the ground, the survivors could not believe their eyes. They had seen fleets come before. They had seen promises of rescue, fall in fire and blood. But never this. Never a fleet so merciless, so unstoppable, so utterly calm as it tore the Empire apart. Mothers held their children high so they could see. Elders whispered prayers, not of fear but of gratitude. The humans had turned the tide of the galaxy itself. On the enemy flagship, the Supreme Commander struggled to breathe. His heart pounded. In his chest, each beat a reminder that his empire's pride was shattering before him. His officers shouted, voices desperate, "We are losing control of the flanks. Our carriers are gone. Their fighters cut through us like smoke." Commander slammed his claws against the armrest, his eyes burning with denial. "We are the Empire. We cannot lose to one fleet." But even as he roared, he knew the truth. This was no ordinary fleet. This was something the Empire had never faced. Humanity's fury forged into steel. Fear spread faster than commands. Across the Empire's armada, captains broke formation. Some tried to retreat, engines flaring as they turned away from the slaughter. Others fired wildly, their shots scattered and desperate. Unity was gone. The proud armada was no longer an army. It was a swarm of frightened ships, each trying to escape the inevitable. The humans showed no mercy. Every retreating vessel was hunted down. Fighters swarmed them like wolves, blasting engines, cutting off escape routes. Human warships focused, their fire with precision, striking one target after another until nothing was left. The void lit up with fire, the echoes of explosions rolling across space. In the command bunker on the colony, survivors cheered with tears in their eyes. Their leader whispered, "The Empire is finished." For the first time, hope was not just a dream, it was real. Above them, humanity pressed deeper into the enemy fleet. It was not a clash anymore. It was an execution. Human ships wove between the Empire's vessels like predators circling prey, striking again and again until the enemy was bleeding from every side. Dreadnoughts unleashed beams of energy that cut through multiple ships in a single shot, leaving trails of fire across the stars. The enemy commander watched helplessly. "Retreat," he finally ordered, his voice hollow. "Save what you can." His officers stared at him in disbelief. For generations, the Empire had never retreated. But now it had no choice. The retreat turned to chaos. Ships fled in every direction, crashing into one another, scattering like frightened animals. Human fighters gave chase, tearing through their ranks. The Empire's greatest armada, once the terror of the galaxy, was reduced to a fleeing swarm. On the ground, survivors laughed and cried as they watched the enemy run. Children shouted, "They're scared. They're running away." Soldiers who had once buried their weapons in despair now lifted them high in triumph. The hopeless had become witnesses to history, the moment when the galaxy changed forever. The human fleet advanced one last time, tightening its formation. Their ships glowed like burning stars, weapons primed for the final strike. The survivors below felt the air tremble, their hearts pounding as if the world itself awaited the end. And in that silence, one truth rang louder than any explosion. Humanity was no longer the weak newcomer to the stars. Humanity had become the storm. The retreat had begun, but it was too late. The Empire's ships scattered like frightened birds, engines burning, formations broken. Some crashed into each other in their desperation to flee. Others vanished into hyperspace, abandoning comrades, without shame. The great armada that once darkened the sky was nothing but chaos and fear. But the human fleet did not let them escape. They advanced with deadly calm, weapons locked, targeting engines first. Beams of blue fire lanced across the void, tearing through fleeing cruisers, crippling their drives so they spun helplessly into the darkness. Fighters swarmed stragglers, cutting them down with merciless precision. Dreadnoughts fired again and again, each blast splitting battleships into flaming wrecks. On the surface of the colony, the survivors stared upward as the heavens themselves seemed to shatter. The empire that had crushed world after world was being torn apart before their very eyes. Mothers hugged their children, whispering, "Remember this day. Remember who came." Soldiers cheered with broken voices, many falling to their knees, as tears streamed down their faces. The alien commander on the Empire's flagship watched his screens in horror. Wreckage filled every view. His fleet, his pride, his power, it was gone. His officers begged him for orders, but he had none left. His claws shook as he whispered, "This is the end." And then the end came. The lead human dreadnought charged, its main weapon, a cannon larger than any ever built by alien hands. Energy gathered at its core, brighter than the stars around it. Space itself seemed to bend under the pressure, waves of power rolling outward. Every survivor in the enemy fleet felt it in their bones. The commander closed his eyes. The human cannon fired. A beam of pure energy cut across the void, slicing through the enemy flagship like a blade through glass. The ship split apart instantly, its core detonating in a massive explosion that consumed dozens of nearby vessels. The blast lit up the entire sector, turning night into day for one brief, terrible moment. Silence followed. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Empire's fleet but drifting wreckage and dying embers. The battlefield that had once been filled with proud warships was now a graveyard of steel. The human fleet floated in the center, calm, unbroken, untouched. Their lights glowed steady, their engines hummed softly, their silence more terrifying than thunder. They had answered the SOS not with words, but with fire and finality. On the ground, the survivors erupted in cries of joy. They hugged, they wept, they shouted into the night sky. For the first time in generations, they were free. They had called for help, and against all odds it had come. But beyond relief, there was awe. Everyone who survived that night knew the truth. The humans were no longer just another race in the galaxy. They were something far greater, something the galaxy had underestimated for too long. News of the battle spread faster than light. Survivors told their story across star systems. Traders carried whispers into neutral zones. Even the fleeing enemy, captains carried the tale, their fear poisoning their own empire from within. And the story was always the same. One SOS, and humanity's war fleet answered. On alien worlds, rulers trembled. Armies questioned their strength. Civilians whispered in fear. If one human fleet could destroy an entire armada, what else? Were they hiding? How many more fleets waited in silence, watching, preparing? And on Earth, in hidden command centers deep below the surface, the message returned. The colony was saved. Humanity's leaders stood in silence as the reports came, and they did not cheer, they did not boast. They only nodded as if the outcome had always been certain. Because to them, this was never just about one battle. It was about sending a message. The galaxy would never again call humans weak. Never again would they be mocked as latecomers to the stars. The Empire's fall was proof enough. Humanity was here, and humanity was strong. Above the freed colony, the human fleet lingered a moment longer, their silhouettes glowing against the wreckage. Then slowly, one by one, their engines flared, and they slipped back into the void. Silent, watchful, ready. The survivors raised their hands to the sky, watching their saviors disappear. They knew this was not the end. It was the beginning. The galaxy had changed forever, and it had changed because humanity had answered the call.